became the first British astronaut when, in May 1991, she launched on a Russian Soyuz spacecraft and spent 8 days orbiting the Earth, living and working on the MIR Space Station. With the 30th anniversary of her spaceflight this year, we're really thrilled that Helen is joining us for our showcase event. Welcome, Helen.
Thank you, Susanna. And you know, it's always a delight to work with Speakers Corner. I'm really delighted to be here and to share this platform with, with Annie and with Anne. So yeah, really thank you for inviting me. I thought I'd like to talk around the theme of working together because, well, partly because we're all in this pandemic situation when actually, working remotely seems to be more the theme of the day for many of us. And also actually, there are many aspects of that I learned from my space mission that I've translated into my personal as well as private life that you might find useful yourself. Now, of course, with any space mission, like any complex project, you're relying on lots of various elements being brought together to make it successful. And you wouldn't be surprised if I tell you that, rather like a polar expedition, I'm sure there are all these different teams, network of teams actually, that have to work in a collaborative way. What really surprised me when I started my training and started to understand a little bit about how these teams are working was that hugely non-competitive way that the collaboration happened, that actually everybody was very much looking towards a shared aim, that shared purpose. And it was a very simple one. That was the idea of getting a succession of crews into space and back to Earth safely. And over and above anything that any individual team or any individual person in any individual team did, it was that end shared purpose that was so important. And I think it was that helped them to collaborate so well, and a very sort of top-down approach. Now, of course, that had to be met by a bottom-up approach, which I'll come on to in a minute. But nonetheless, all of this sort of collaboration doesn't mean to say that space missions go without any hiccups. And I think it would be right to say that every space mission has its problems. Mine was absolutely no exception. And I'd like just to share a picture of my launch, which was where the first hiccup actually happened. This is a Soyuz booster rocket launching a Soyuz spacecraft into space. You can see just a few seconds into the launch, we've got those, the outside 4 little booster engines working with the central core. They work simultaneously and give us the maximum G. We have about 4 G during the launch. So we feel 4 times as heavy as we do normally on Earth. But of course, we've done many more G in centrifuges in the training, and the launch itself doesn't last for long, although it's very kind of a bumpy and lumpy system as a jet launch. Sort of as one of the rocket's engines is jettisoned and the next one kicks in. So it's not a nice sort of smooth transition into increased G and acceleration. But nonetheless, it's kind of an exciting time for the astronauts because this is something that we've been working towards for so long. But it was in the first few seconds of my launch when the first problem really happened. And this was an oxygen valve. And now an oxygen valve got stuck open. Now, you might think, well, what's the problem with that? You've got plenty of oxygen, but actually oxygen is a real hazard. You need to have enough, obviously, to breathe, to survive. But if you have too much, then that's a risk of an explosion. So had that valve remained stuck open, then we would have had to have released all of the oxygen from the capsule and returned to Earth on the very next orbit. And I would have spent 90 odd minutes in space. But the important thing then is that I would have been safe. I would have been safe and I would have been able to go on another rocket. A second launch would have happened to space. So this is what I mean about the end goal, that actually, although that one specific thing might have gone wrong, and quite significantly wrong, the actual end mission would still have been able to happen. But inside our spacecraft, up there on top of the rocket, in fact, if I show you with my cursor, they're just below the spike on the very top. That's where our Soyuz spacecraft is. And this is what it's like inside. 3 seats altogether. You can see a kind of a black empty seat on the very right of the picture there where the flight engineer sits, because this photograph was taken during a training session. We can't really get a decent photograph of what it's like inside a Soyuz spacecraft in real life because it is so cramped. This picture was taken actually by somebody who's looking down from a little module above our heads. So you can see fairly cramped. Actually in this position, I'm in the middle seat here in this training session. That's where the commander's going to sit for the launch. My seat would have been that one on the left of the photograph there. But from the very beginning of our training, a very, very different way of working was impressed upon me, different from anything I'd really been familiar with before. And it was how open and honest we were expected to be, not just with each other, with like me and my crew, but actually with everybody, with all of the trainers, with all of the scientists, with everybody in any team we worked with. Everybody was expected to be completely open and honest. So we would share ideas and voice concerns. We would admit errors and celebrate our successes. And this is what I meant at the beginning when I talked about this bottom-up approach, meeting the top-down one of a shared goal and the collaboration. But this openness enables us to actually reduce the risk of individual elements of that mission failing. So although the collaboration helps to sort of bring everything together, the individual elements are made by these different teams. And if individuals in those teams are open and honest, we can fix problems before they usually become a real hazard. And as usually you require two problems to come together before they really create your a big issue, because you're in anything really serious, you've got a backup system like being able to come back to Earth, for instance, and have a second attempt at that launch. Then this does enable the overall success of a space program with successive crews of people launching into space. But this was our spacecraft, a tiny Soyuz spacecraft with the three of us inside it, having got into space by that huge rocket. Of course, now the engines are all jettisoned and it's just our tiny Soyuz spacecraft gradually catching up with the space station. And I was aiming for the MIR Space Station, very much like the International Space Station now, made up in this modular way. We made our final approach a couple of 100 kilometers away when we realized that we had another problem. We were getting disparate information from the computers. We were at the wrong angle to the Earth. Now, we knew that if we missed the space station by a mile, it really didn't matter. We had enough fuel to go round the Earth and have a second attempt at docking onto the station. But if we missed our docking port by just a few centimeters, we risked damaging the space station and our spacecraft, so that not only might we not survive, but actually the two astronauts already on board that space station who are looking forward to our arrival, they might not make it either. So now, of course, we had done this in the training before. We knew what to do and we knew how to go onto manual control of our spacecraft. But now this was where all of that openness and that communication really came to the fore. Yes, we went straight into, if you like, autopilot. We knew what roles we had to do and we got on with those. But it was because we could be completely open. And when one of us said, that's fine, I've got this, we trusted them, absolutely implicitly trusted them. We trusted each other with our lives. And of course, I'm here to tell the story. We made that docking in one piece, and that absolute fantastic feeling when we were able to float inside onto the space station was just absolutely, one of the best feelings I think I have ever had. Those two people who I launched into space with, my commander and my flight engineer, they became my best friends and I still count them amongst the best friends I have ever had. Now, that openness and the honesty that got me to the space station is really just indicative of the way the whole space program works. It's enabled multiple launches over decades. If you think back to the Russians in particular, they're decades hugely influential internationally, of course. And it's also enabled on a very, very individual level, people like me, to do something that I would never, ever have expected. I mean, just as Anne said, she never expected to be a polar explorer. I certainly never expected to be an astronaut. I also grew up in a very normal kind of environment. I felt always very ordinary. I wasn't anything special from anybody else. Every quality I felt in myself I could see in at least one other person. So when I heard of this opportunity for a Briton to go to and train with the cosmonauts and to do experiments on a space station, I just assumed that they'd never choose me. They'd choose somebody who was from the military, who flew aircraft, who was made of the right stuff. But actually, I had no idea at that time how much teamwork was going to be so relevant to that selection, and actually how important it is in teamwork to be able to empathize with other people, and how much easier that is when you can recognize something of yourself in them. And I knew, though, if I didn't put myself forward for this opportunity, nobody else was going to do it. And well, if people laughed at me for having the audacity to think that maybe I could actually go into space, well, you know what? I could deal with that. And so I decided to have a go. I was selected, and it was through that training that also taught me not just about space, of course, but very much how to work together. So I got not only to go into space and to, experience this wonderful feeling of feeling weightless. This is the most natural, relaxing feeling you can imagine. I forgot what it was like to sit down, to stand up. And of course, this is great because you can use the full space on board your spacecraft. So when you're in a completely new environment like this, instead of trying to replicate exactly what you had before, obviously some things you have to replicate, like the life support systems, but we didn't need to have a seat to sit down on after the launch, and being able to use those 3 dimensions meant that the roominess of the whole spacecraft felt much bigger, and we could just get on and, of course, not just have fun like this, but also, of course, use that feeling of weightlessness for the job that I'd gone up to do, which was doing experiments. And this is just a few of those experiments that I took with me. I took experiments, and also there was technology and infrastructure that was taken up before I launched into space. And we all know, working from home, how much we do rely on certain bits of physical kit, and our broadband and everything to get us into work. But it really is those communications back with mission control that enabled all of this to go on. Communications that were vital, not just to do my job, but vital for my well-being. Now, we had no internet. This was 1991 when I flew into space. There was no email back then either. I mean, nowadays on board International Space Station, they have a satellite phone if they want to, 24 hours a day. Plenty of email, plenty of video links. We had the radio, and the radio only when we were over Russia, when we had a direct line of contact with mission control. But mission control knew it was so important for these communications. Of course, we had regular communications, and we needed it for our work, and they were frequent, so we knew exactly when they were going to happen. But at the end of each connection, mission control made sure that there was at least a few minutes of time where we could just chat, because it's that general relaxed chat. It's talking about the details of somebody's work, somebody's life, getting friends and family to come into mission control so that we can chat to them and make those connections. And it's that detail of life on Earth that kept us safe and sane in space. I think something we probably all recognize when we're missing our friends and family so much in this sort of period of lockdown, but so important, and it's something that I think really shouldn't be taken lightly. But it's not all work and no play. This is one of the views outside my window. I'm showing you the way I took the photograph, which kind of makes it feel upside down, but of course, you don't get this normal up and down anymore. This is over the Pacific Ocean when the sun is almost setting. So it's just glancing off the sea, and you can just see on the rim of the Earth there, that thin blue line of our atmosphere. We would often spend time looking out of the window. This was important to us, but we all like to spot times, spot places that we recognize. And I've found this photograph, actually taken quite recently by Jessica Mayer from the International Space Station, of I hope you recognise parts of this. So north is on the left of the photograph as we're looking out. So we're looking here, sort of running down the middle certainly is England. And of course at night you can recognise the lights. So I reckon that bright light there, we've got London, so the southeast England. And as we move up through Birmingham, Liverpool, and go across the water there to Dublin, yeah, and Belfast, and then over to Glasgow and Edinburgh as well. So beautiful, beautiful sights and things that that we all look forward to seeing. This is the current crew, carrying on with all of their experiments. And you might think, well, what's the big deal? There's 7 people now up in space. I mean, that's quite a big crew actually. And we talk about remote working, but compared to us, there's 7 of them. What would we give every day now to be able to talk face to face with 6 other people in our workforce? Oh, wouldn't that be bliss? But of course, they're living in a very confined environment, and they will be relying on all of their tolerance and flexibility to be able to get through their time up there. Of course, communicating very much with their friends and family wherever they can on Earth. But also, it's a long time, and so they try and mark it by doing things that make the days a little bit less samey every time. So Christmas Day, for instance, was a big celebration, and here's Shannon Walker. She was one of the SpaceX astronauts, and look, if you look on the top of the Christmas tree, she's put a model of her Crew Dragon spacecraft up there instead of a star, which I think is rather nice. But it's all of these the little things like marking time, it's the communication with our friends and family. And it's about enjoying those little moments as well. Moments. It's okay every now and again to have really bad days, and we all do that. But we can think forward, and astronauts are encouraged to think about the good times that will happen and to try and learn from those downtimes so that we can put that into the rest of our lives in the future to make the future lives even better than they were before. So I hope I've sort of just given you some idea about the kind of things that come together to what my view is to make a successful space mission. I think very much like Anne was saying, it's about people working together and pulling together. But for me, the whole thing is about amazing experiences that can happen, however ordinary you might feel you are. Amazing experience and fantastic achievements that might even be ultimately long-term internationally significant when we push forward our boundaries, when we work together in this open and collaborative way, we really can enjoy the rich opportunities of our vast and beautiful universe. And with that, I'm going to hand back to Susanna.
Helen, that was really stunning to hear and see all about your experiences. Really fascinating, and thank you so much.